I still remember the exact moment my generation lost its innocence. It was a Friday in 1999, and I was watching the cafeteria TV when Columbine happened. 3 weeks later, we had our first lockdown drill. None of us knew it then, but school would never feel safe again. It was a typical boring day in calculus, only it was Friday, 7th period, meaning the week was almost over and spring break would finally be upon us. Everybody was getting antsy in their seats. We didn't have a test that day like a lot of my friends did with their other teachers, so our teacher, in the middle of class, just decided to start playing games with us on sportscle.com. He was a very laid-back teacher like that. Mr. Henderson would sometimes bring his guitar on Fridays and play us classic rock songs. He was the kind of teacher who made you actually want to come to class. As we were doing some brand logo quiz on Sporkle, I remember the exact moment it happened. Right after my friend answered a question, I remember the exact answer, Adidas. The dean's voice came through the loudspeaker. He sounded panicked and frantic as he told all the teachers this was not a drill and to go into lockdown immediately. I actually got chills. Goosebumps appeared on my arms as our usually laid-back teacher suddenly seemed panicked. He ran to turn off the lights and ushered us to the back corner of the room. This was only our third lockdown drill ever. The concept was still new to us. We'd only started doing them that year, after Columbine had shocked the nation just 2 years earlier. We all sat in silence for about 2 minutes. Then the usual buzzing that came from a panel in the back of the room ceased, indicating that the school must have cut all the power. We all looked at each other, realizing this must be serious. This had never happened during our practice drills. A few more minutes of waiting later, we heard a man screaming at the top of his lungs, coming down the hallway. 2 girls in the class actually started crying, which made all of us even more scared. As the screaming got closer to the classroom, the lunatic-sounding man started banging on the lockers while screaming, "I'll kill all of you." It was at that moment that I started to fear for my life. My teacher shushed us as we all looked at each other to see our peers' reactions. Some kids had their phones out, the flip phones we had back then, texting their parents. I saw one guy silently crying, trying to hide it behind his hands. The banging then moved from the lockers to our classroom door. And that's when one of the crying girls screamed, "No!" The banging on the door only grew worse as the man started screaming, "Open up! Open up!" 2 of the girls in the class were crying out loud now. I remember thinking about my little sister in the elementary school next door. I remember wondering if I'd ever see my parents again. This was the stuff we'd seen on the news. But it wasn't supposed to happen to us. It felt like an eternity that man was pounding at the door, but eventually he finally continued down the hallway, screaming like a mentally insane person until we could not hear him anymore. I'd say 10 minutes later, though it felt like half an hour given the situation, the dean came back on the loudspeaker, explaining the situation. Which was surprising for him to do, honestly. Usually they kept us in the dark. He explained that an apparently mentally unstable person had entered the building and assaulted the woman sitting at the front desk, causing her to flee the building screaming. Staff wasn't sure if the man was armed or not. Now, this was before the school had cameras or could afford proper security. This was 2001, remember. 9/11 hadn't even happened yet. The world still felt somewhat safe. So the school was wide open to something like this happening. The staff had done a sweep of all the hallways and classrooms and couldn't find him. So the dean instructed the teachers to resume teaching but to keep all doors locked and to not let any students leave for any reason. We tried to continue with class, but nobody could focus. We just sat there in the dim afternoon light coming through the windows, jumping at every sound. The most disturbing part, however, came later that night. One of the janitors working the night shift found the man sleeping in one of the storage closets near the back end of the school. And according to rumors that were spread by my peers, sticking out of his pocket was a .44 Magnum. The janitor must have done something to alert him, maybe leaving the closet door open, because by the time a police officer could arrive on the scene, the man was gone. My entire class, as far as I know to this day, has no idea if this man was ever found. But I like to think that right now, he's being given the proper help that he needs. That was the day I realized my childhood was officially over. We were among the first generation to grow up with lockdown drills, with the fear that school, the place we spent most of our time, might not be safe. Subscribe if you have ever gone on a lockdown drill. State the reasons. Let's continue. Today's kids don't know what it was like before. They don't remember when schools didn't have security guards, when doors weren't locked during the day, when lockdown drills weren't part of the routine. I'm curious, where are you watching this from? Drop a comment with your city or country, and let me know. Do you remember the first time your school went into lockdown? Or are you from a place where this still seems unthinkable? I'll read every single comment. A substitute teacher who didn't know our school's layout. A gunshot 2 blocks away and 32 sixth graders locked in a room with no way to call for help. This is the story of how a complete stranger became our hero in 2002. On November 14, 2002. I was in 6th grade, and it was one of those gray, cold November days where it gets dark by 4:30 p.m. Our regular teacher, Mrs. Patterson, was out sick, so we had a substitute, a young guy fresh out of college named Mr. Ryan who looked almost as nervous as we felt having a sub. This was still the early days of school lockdown procedures. Columbine had happened 3 years earlier, and schools were just starting to figure out what active shooter protocols even meant. Most of us had only done 1 or 2 practice drills. It all still felt very abstract. We were in the middle of a math lesson. I specifically remember learning long division, when we heard it. A sharp crack that echoed through the afternoon air. Mr. Ryan's head snapped up. What was that? Sounded like a car backfiring, someone said. But then we heard it again. Crack. Crack, and then shouting in the distance. Mr. Ryan's face went pale. He walked quickly to the window.
Okay, finish up those equations. I just noticed something interesting developing outside the window I want to show you.
Everybody get down. Under the desks, quick! Stay low and cover your heads.
Our classroom was on the first floor, facing the street, and we could see his body tense up. Everyone. Back of the room. Now. The way he said it made us all freeze. This wasn't our easygoing substitute anymore. This was someone who realized something was very, very wrong. We scrambled to the back of the classroom. My best friend Sarah grabbed my hand, and I could feel her shaking. Or maybe I was the one shaking. I honestly can't remember. What about lockdown procedures? Asked Taylor, one of the kids whose mom was a teacher at another school. And that's when Mr. Ryan admitted something that terrified us. I don't know them. They didn't go over this building's procedures in the orientation. He was a substitute. He'd been working in the district for 3 weeks. He knew the basic idea: lock the door, turn off lights, hide, but he didn't know where the lockdown button was, didn't know the specific protocol for our building, didn't even know if he should call the office or if that would make noise that would attract attention. He locked the door, at least he knew to do that. Turned off the lights. Pulled down the window shade. But then he just stood there, and we could see the panic in his eyes. More shouts from outside. The sound of running footsteps. A siren in the distance, police or ambulance, we couldn't tell. Is someone shooting? One of the girls asked, her voice tiny. I don't know, Mr. Ryan said honestly. But we're going to stay quiet and stay safe, okay? This was before smartphones were everywhere. This was flip phone era, and most sixth graders didn't even have those. Mr. Ryan had a cell phone, but he was afraid to call anyone, afraid the noise or the light from the screen would give away our position if someone dangerous was nearby. So, we just sat there in the dark. 32 11 and 12-year-olds and one 23-year-old substitute teacher who was clearly just as scared as we were. What felt like hours passed. In reality, it was probably 20 minutes. We could hear sirens now, lots of them. More shouts from outside. At one point, we heard heavy footsteps running down our hallway, and every single one of us held our breath. Mr. Ryan positioned himself between us and the door. I'll never forget that. This guy who'd known us for 3 hours put his body between us and whatever danger might come through that door. Is this what they meant by teachers are angels and their reward is in heaven? Finally, we heard a knock on the door. This is Principal Mendoza. Mr. Ryan, if you're in there, it's safe to open the door. But Mr. Ryan didn't move. How do I know that's really you? He called out. Smart guy. He'd thought about that. What was I wearing when I met you this morning? Principal Mendoza asked. A blue tie with yellow stripes and a coffee stain on your collar. We heard Principal Mendoza actually laugh. Okay, it's really me. You can open the door. When Mr. Ryan finally unlocked the door, we saw Principal Mendoza standing there with 2 police officers. That's when we knew it was really over. Turns out, there had been a shooting 2 blocks from school. A domestic dispute that spilled onto the street. The suspect had fired several shots and then fled on foot in the direction of our school. Police weren't sure if he was heading toward the building or just running past it, so they'd called the school and told them to lock down immediately. But our classroom phone had been broken for 2 weeks. The school was supposed to fix it but hadn't gotten around to it yet. So we never got the call. Mr. Ryan had no idea we were supposed to be in lockdown. He'd just heard the shots and made the right call on his own. Mr. Ryan only worked at our school for 2 more weeks before he took a permanent position at another district. But before he left, our class wrote him thank you cards. Mine said, "Thank you for protecting us even though you were scared too." I ran into him years later when I was in college. He was teaching high school by then. He told me he still thought about that day, about how terrified he'd been that he'd do something wrong and put us in danger. But here's the thing, he did everything right. He kept 32 kids calm and safe when he had every reason to panic himself. So, I'm asking you, where were you when you heard about the aftermath of active shooting in schools and how did you feel? Do you think lockdown procedures are enough or should we do more? Comment below, have you ever been in a lockdown situation? And if you were a teacher or student in those early years when we were all figuring this out, what do you remember? Let's share these stories. They matter.